In September of 1948, on a dry lake bed in Utah, an American motorcyclist stripped down to his swimming trunks, lay flat across the fuel tank of a British motorcycle with his legs stretched straight out behind him, and rode it to over 150 miles an hour. He did it to prove a point about a machine that a small, financially struggling company in England had built almost by accident. This is the story of the Vincent Black Shadow, and for a brief, remarkable stretch of the 20th century, the fastest production vehicle of any kind on Earth. Vincent Motorcycles was never a giant. The company was founded by an engineer named Philip Vincent, who bought a small, struggling motorcycle maker called HRD in 1928 and rebuilt it around his own ideas. Through the 1930s, Vincent brought on an Australian engineer named Phil Irving, and together they developed a series of well-regarded single-cylinder motorcycles. Then, according to a story that's followed the company for decades, Irving was looking at two of his own single-cylinder engine drawings laid on top of each other on a light table, and realized that joined together at an angle, they'd essentially form a V-twin engine for free, using components the company already knew how to build. That idea became the Vincent Rapide in 1946, a 998cc V-twin, powerful enough that Vincent was already advertising it as the world's fastest production motorcycle at around 110 miles an hour. For most companies, that would have been the finish line. For Vincent, it was a starting point. Company management was reportedly hesitant to push further, worried about cost and reliability. But Phil Irving and the company's own test rider, George Brown, kept developing a higher performance version anyway, refining the engine, tuning it for more power, adding a distinctive innovation for the era, cantilever rear suspension, and unusually large drum brakes, genuine safety upgrades for a motorcycle capable of speeds most machines of the era couldn't approach. The prototype came together on February 16, 1948. One detail set the new model apart before anyone even heard the engine run. Vincent finished the entire engine in deep black enamel, partly for style, partly because the darker surface actually helped the engine shed heat more efficiently. The name followed naturally, the Black Shadow. It was officially unveiled at the Earl's Court Motorcycle Show in London later that year. The specifications alone were startling for 1948, a 998cc, 50-degree V-twin producing 55 horsepower, dry sump lubrication, and a genuine, tested top speed of 125 miles an hour. Nothing else built for public sale could touch it. The motorcycle press called it, essentially, a machine for connoisseurs, and it quickly earned a nickname that stuck, the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles. But a claim like fastest production motorcycle in the world only means something if somebody's willing to prove it in public. And that's exactly what happened a few months later at the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah. On September 13, 1948, an American rider named Raleigh Free set out to break the American motorcycle speed record. It's worth being precise here, because the story often gets slightly blurred. The bike Free actually rode wasn't a standard showroom Black Shadow. It was a race-prepared, lightened derivative that Vincent would soon formalize as a distinct model, the Black Lightning. Free made his early runs in conventional leathers and hit around 148.6 miles per hour, fast, but not quite where he wanted to be. Convinced the drag from his riding gear was costing him precious speed, Free stripped down to a pair of swimming trunks, lay flat across the fuel tank with his legs stretched straight out behind him, and made his final run, following a black stripe painted onto the salt to hold his line, at an average of 150.313 miles per hour. The photograph taken that day, a man in a bathing suit stretched flat across a motorcycle at 150 miles an hour, became one of the most famous images in the history of motorsport. Vincent leaned into it immediately, using the moment to sell the idea that the standard Black Shadow and the racing Black Lightning built from the same architecture weren't just fast on paper. Only 31 Black Lightnings were ever built, and that was, in many ways, the peak. Vincent as a company never found stable financial footing. An attempt to build a Vincent-engined version of the American Indian motorcycle in 1949, sometimes nicknamed the Vindian, drained capital without paying off. The company reorganized under a new name in 1952, and by 1955, financial pressure finally forced Vincent to stop building motorcycles entirely. Across the full run of the Black Shadow, from 1948 to 1955, roughly 1,700 were built in total, a tiny number by the standards of any major manufacturer, and yet enough that most of them are still accounted for today, changing hands at auction for well over $100,000. The Black Shadow's speed record for a production motorcycle would eventually be surpassed as engineering moved on, the way every record eventually is. But for years, a small company in Stevenage, England, one that never had the scale or the budget of its competitors, built the single fastest thing you could legally buy and ride on two wheels, using an engine design that, as the story goes, was discovered almost by accident on a light table. Do you think Vincent could have survived if it had focused only on the Black Shadow's success instead of chasing riskier projects like the Vindian, or was the company always destined to run out of money regardless? Let me know what you think in the comments.